The first crack was microscopic, an invisible fissure spider webbing out from the rim of a Riedel Bordeaux glass, but I swear it thundered through the dining room like shrapnel. Everything after that registered in impossible slow motion. The candle flame bowing under a draft, the maitre d' tilting his head at the disturbance, the hush that slid across linen tables like a cold tide. We were tucked into a banquette at Le Brioche Noir, the kind of place that hires lighting consultants to bathe each patron in pre-approved shadows. Melissa insisted on celebrating our 30th anniversary here despite the fact she'd once mocked the wine list as liquid hubris. I thought it was nostalgia. Now I know it was staging. She held the glass aloft, wrist cocked as though conducting a chamber orchestra. "Here's to new chapters," she said, voice crystalline, smile rehearsed to lethal perfection. Her gaze never drifted to me, not even a polite peripheral glance. Instead, every lumen of her attention locked on Jordan Ellis, who lounged beside her in a tailored blazer that cost more than my first car. He pressed his forearm against hers in a gesture so practiced it hurt to watch, then flashed the half-smirk I used to coax out of him during high school free throw drills. Back then he called me coach. Tonight he looked at me like I was the doorman delaying his limousine. Melissa's free hand drifted to her abdomen. Her fingers rested there, possessive and soft. "I'm pregnant," she announced, words gliding across the table with the casualness of a weather report. The waiter, still mid-pour, paused long enough for crimson wine to beat at the lip of the bottle. Somewhere near the windows a couple erupted in laughter, oblivious. In my veins, something colder than fear detonated, an arctic bloom that froze shock into diamond clarity. I didn't gasp, didn't shout, didn't even blink. 6 weeks earlier, fate had mailed me a dossier of late-night hotel receipts, Cayman transfers, and text messages littered with the initial J. Tonight was simply the dress rehearsal going live. I lifted my own glass, matching her toast millimeter for millimeter. "To clean slates," I said. The stem didn't tremble in my grip, adrenaline had stabilized every cell. Melissa finally flicked her gaze toward me, and for the first time in years I watched comprehension outpace her choreography. Jordan frowned, a hairline crack in his confidence. "I emptied our joint accounts this morning," I continued, polite as a banker declining overdraft. "Filed for divorce at 9:03. And the board ratified an emergency freeze on fiduciary disbursements." I set the glass down unsipped, slid my cloth napkin onto the table and rose. Silence flooded the room so completely the piano's sustain pedal hummed in the vacuum. I noted details for later, Jordan's knuckles whitening around his fork, Melissa's throat bobbing once, the maitre d' pivoting to intercept. But no one moved. I offered them a final nod, condolence, perhaps, or benediction, then walked out, heels ticking across marble, free man exiting a mausoleum. Freedom, it turns out, smells like industrial disinfectant and humming neon. Motel 117 on the edge of Glendale advertised, weekly rates, and cable TV, beneath a flickering sign. Perfect. I paid in cash, $320 slid across bulletproof plexiglass. The night manager never looked up from his telenovela, he just punched a keycard and pushed a clipboard at me. 30 years of executive suites, yet I felt strangely royal dragging a scuffed roller bag down a dim hallway that reeked of lemon bleach. Inside, the room was a catalog of cheap choices. Faux oak dresser, bedspread patterned with galaxies of burnt orange swirls, standalone lamp that flickered when the fridge compressor kicked on. I sat on the mattress, spring squeaked, releasing a puff of stale air, then opened the navy folder marked Plan Y. My initials were embossed in gold foil. Old habits die harder than marriages. The folder held, notarized emergency orders freezing Hughes Hayes Design Group assets. Copies of wire recall requests. A revocation of power of attorney Melissa signed 3 years ago for estate planning efficiency, and never reread. There was also a thumb drive containing every compromising JPEG and bank ledger our IT subcontractor had recovered from cloud backups. I'd paid extra for timestamps and hash verification. Truth needed airtight provenance. 2:14 a.m. Phone buzzed. Melissa, 3 missed. 2:15 a.m. Jordan E. 1 missed. I powered the device off, removed the SIM, and slid both beneath the Gideon Bible in the nightstand. If God wanted to keep them company, I wouldn't object. Adrenaline receded, leaving tremors in its wake. My hand shook harder than in Le Brioche, now that no audience required poise. I laced fingers behind my head, stared up at a popcorn ceiling littered with shadow craters, and let 30 years spool backward. Melissa in a thrift store wedding dress splattered by unexpected rain. Our first apartment with a faulty radiator we used as a makeshift grill. Late-night brainstorming sessions where she called me numbers genius, and kissed the stress from my temples. Somewhere along the reel, colors desaturated until only grayscale remained. I blinked them away. At 3:07 a.m., hunger prodded. I ignored it. At 3:38 a.m., I laughed, quiet, startled, because I'd just realized I'd left Le Brioche without paying the check, and for once I didn't feel guilty. Let Melissa sign that charge to her corporate American Express. It would bounce by dawn. When exhaustion finally overtook rage, I toed off dress shoes, draped my suit across a chair, and crawled under a blanket that smelled faintly of chlorine and old tobacco. The mattress sagged. Good. It felt honest. I whispered a promise to whatever part of me still believed in vows. Tomorrow we rebuild on bedrock, not illusions. Sleep accepted the contract. Dawn bled mauve over the San Gabriel peaks as I guided my sedan up the cracked ramp of Sunny Box self-storage. Rows of corrugated steel doors reflected the sunrise like closed eyelids. I parked beside Unit 9C, Melissa's private dumping ground for archival overflow, and punched in the 6-digit code she assumed I'd forgotten. The lock clunked. The roll door groaned skyward, revealing dust motes swirling like startled gnats. Even in gloom I spotted her organizational vanity. Pastel labels, calligraphy marker. I tugged latex gloves from my pocket. Television had taught me fingerprints and hubris don't mix, and commenced archaeology. Box 1. Tax folders. 2008 to 2012. Box 2. Discontinued brochure stock for conferences long past. Box 3. A dead office phone, power adapter missing. Useless. Box 4 felt different, lighter, newer manila. The top folder bore Jordan's handwriting. Ellis Consulting, invoices. Inside, monthly wire stubs from a personal Wells Fargo account I'd never opened. 5-figure sums, regular as rent, each countersigned by Melissa. Consulting for what? He'd been a junior copywriter then. Adrenaline sharpened my vision. I photographed every page, flash off, shutter silent. Behind that folder, a stamped envelope, no return address. Cayman National Bank. I slid it carefully. Inside, quarterly statements for JE Holdings Ltd. Balances north of $700,000, transfers aligning perfectly with our firm's odd marketing expense disbursements. Embezzlement wore pastel tabs now. Lower in the box, a sealed packet. Shareholder Amendment, 2009. Clause 17B granted Jordan 30% equity upon incapacitation or dissolution of founding partner Robert Hayes. My own signature sprawled across the line, but the looping R looked jagged, copied, wrong. Melissa's pen strokes, however, were unmistakable. 15 years ago I'd been pulling all-nighters redesigning client dashboards. 15 years ago Melissa had framed my future demise as a contingency plan for her protege. Rage threatened to eclipse oxygen. I forced slow counts, inhale 4, hold 4, exhale 6, until pulse decelerated. In a bottom drawer I found a Polaroid. Jordan at age 10, frosting smeared across his cheeks, Melissa kneeling beside him. Caption scrawled, "My brave boy's big day." Date, April 1999, 3 months before Melissa and I met. My temples pounded. I snapped a photo of the photo, placed everything back as if untouched, and lowered the door. Outside, morning traffic hummed normalcy. I leaned against the car, gloves dangling, and tried to reconcile timelines. My first kiss with Melissa, Jordan learning to ride a bike in our cul-de-sac, Melissa's mysterious back pain, that excused her from certain marital intimacies. A crow landed on the chain-link fence, cocking its head like a judge. "You and me both," I muttered. I slid into the driver's seat, documents in the passenger footwell like a stolen crown. Destination, L.A. County Registrar. If the birth certificate corroborated my new suspicion, the betrayal was deeper than adultery. It was lifetime theater with me as unaware benefactor. I turned the key. Engine rumbled. In the rearview mirror, Unit 9C's door looked sealed again, like a wound sutured but still infected. L.A. County's Vital Records office occupies a beige building that smells of toner cartridges and cafeteria coffee. I took a number, a -173, then joined a queue of new parents, genealogists, and one impatient man arguing about passport delays. Fluorescence hummed overhead. Time slowed to DMV viscosity. The clerk finally called me forward. I slid a request form under the glass. Certified birth record, Jordan Garrett Ellis, April 1994. She tapped keys, printed a fee slip, and vanished into backroom archives. 5 minutes felt like 5 subway years. I memorized the grout pattern in the tile. She returned with a sealed envelope. I paid, stepped aside, slid it open. Mother, Melissa Ann Hughes. Father. Blank. No adoption notation, no corrections. Melissa had birthed Jordan 3 months prior to our first date, then repackaged him as a neighbor's nephew, later a rising star intern. She'd embedded her own child into our company and marriage like a Trojan file. A tremor began at my knuckles, traveled up to elbows. I inhaled, tasted copper. The clerk glanced over. "Sir, you okay?" I nodded, a hinge movement, and exited into glare bright enough to stun. I reached the parking lot, slid behind the wheel, and let the revelation bloom. The teenage boy I'd mentored, the 20-something I'd promoted, the 30-year-old now impregnating my wife was actually my stepson in secret, groomed to replace me financially and intimately. Psychologists will need new terms for that spiral. Grief tried to surface, anger elbowed it aside. Betrayal of that magnitude doesn't merely sever trust, it rewires identity. Who was I if 30 years of father figure moments were faux? Did the laughter around backyard barbecues carry an undercurrent I'd refused to hear? I remembered Jordan asking advice on first mortgages, Melissa watching us from the deck, smile too wide. Chess pieces? Car horns jolted me. Rush hour haze thickened. I started the engine, but instead of heading to the motel I veered toward my sister Grace's townhouse. This earthquake demanded witness. Grace greeted me in yoga pants, flour dusting her hairline. She'd been test baking cinnamon rolls. One look at my face and she ushered me to the dining table. No pleasantries, just a glass of water pressed into my hand. I spread documents, bank slips, forged contracts, the birth record. Her fingers whitened on the tabletop. "That's criminal," she murmured. "It's premeditated," I corrected. She met my eyes. "What's the play?" I pictured my company's headquarters. Our last renovation cost $500,000 and imagined a foreclosure sign out front. Petty? Maybe. Necessary? Yes. I exhaled, a long unspooling. "I burn down the castle," I said. "And build a refuge for the people she stepped on to build it." Grace's brows lifted, approval glinting. She fetched bourbon, scribbled brainstorming columns, legal, media, financial, emotional safeguards. The cinnamon roll timer dinged, she ignored it. War councils sometimes smell like scorched sugar. By midnight we'd mapped a campaign. I wasn't after revenge, I was after narrative control. Melissa had written me as a silent financier. My rewrite would give me dialogue, and a flamethrower. Los Angeles Superior Court, Stanley Mosque Building, glints impassive in morning sun. I walked its granite steps carrying a leather briefcase that felt 10 kilos heavier than usual, stuffed with petitions, injunctions, and 30 years of receipts. The security guard eyed the thickness but waved me through. The clerk's window resembled a bank teller's station, neutral and brisk. I handed over dissolution of marriage, emergency asset restraint pursuant to Corporation Code Section 1800, and a motion for temporary protective order referencing forged signatures and fiduciary malfeasance. Law school dropouts reading this. Study, you might need the vocabulary someday. Paperwork vanished into stamping machines, emerging with embossed seals like fresh tattoos. You'll receive hearing dates by mail, the clerk explained. Her tone suggested she'd seen better soap operas but never one quite so baroque. I thanked her, tucked the documents, and exited into a city that suddenly felt negotiable. On the plaza a busker played Ain't No Sunshine, on muted trumpet. I fished a 5, dropped it in his case. As the notes followed me across Temple Street, I recognized a parallel. The melody once serenaded Melissa and me on a cheap Bluetooth speaker during our second anniversary picnic. She'd leaned into my shoulder, humming. Now it belonged to me alone, retroactively freed from its soundtrack duties. Back in the sedan, I called our COO, Meredith Lynn. She'd joined the firm after we landed a Japanese architecture consortium. She respected numbers more than charisma. Meredith, check your email, emergency board session, today, 4 p.m., I'll chair. A pause crackled. Understood, Bob, she said, voice thin but steady. She must have seen the attachments. I spent midday in a rented workspace downtown, an industrial loft with exposed brick and bottomless drip coffee. Using secure Wi-Fi, I dispersed the evidence archive to 3 encrypted backups, one held by Grace, another by my pro bono lawyer friend Vic Chen, third on a hardware wallet in a safety deposit box. Redundancy is revenge's life insurance. At 3:55 p.m., I strode into the boardroom I'd helped design. Walnut table, bespoke pendant lights. Some directors looked shell-shocked, others furious. Jordan's seat sat empty. Rumor had him stuck in Denver on client business. Melissa arrived last, lawyer in tow, hair impeccable. Our eyes met, words were irrelevant. The meeting lasted 17 minutes. Financial discrepancies spoke louder than human voices. Bylaws allowed interim CEO appointment pending investigation. Motion passed 8-1. Melissa abstained but looked nauseous. Meredith accepted the gavel. I collected my laptop. As I left, I heard Melissa hiss, "Traitor?" but couldn't tell if it was aimed at me or the room. Outside, dust-coated skyscrapers in copper. I leaned against a lamppost and watched the first neon flicker on. 30 years earlier I'd proposed in a greasy spoon under similar glow. My knees had knocked, my heart believed in forever. Tonight, the city hummed a different vow, nothing is permanent, especially cages. I inhaled night air spiked with bus exhaust and felt something startling, relief. Echo Park is a patchwork quilt, craftsman bungalows beside vegan cafes, mariachi trumpets drifting over joggers with earbuds. I found a sublet on Reservoir Street, 600 square feet, honey pine floors, windows that framed sunsets like curated art. The owner, an illustrator off to New York for 6 months, left fairy lights strung across the ceiling. She apologized for the aesthetic. I told her it felt like oxygen. I moved in with 1 suitcase, 1 banker's box of essentials, and a potted snake plant Grace insisted cleans air and karma. First purchase, a cast iron skillet. Second, a single plate, bowl, mug, and set of utensils. Intentional scarcity to keep clutter honest. Night 1, I cooked scrambled eggs with too much butter, ate them standing, and realized I had never before chosen a recipe solely for myself. Marriage had turned meals into performances for clients, investors, or Melissa's Instagram. A ridiculous grin bloomed. I set my laptop on the floor, desk to be procured later, and opened a blank spreadsheet titled Life Ledger. Column A, things I did because she liked them. Column B, things I might like. Row 1 started simple, designer cufflinks versus Silver Lake thrift store t-shirts. Row 12 surprised me, classical playlists versus silence. I filled 50 rows before fatigue nudged me toward the futon. At 2 a.m., my phone lit the ceiling, block number. I let it ring out. Voicemail icon glowed but I deleted it unheard. Silence outweighed curiosity. Mornings adopted ritual quickly. Kettle whistle, pour over coffee, stroll around Echo Park Lake where lotus blooms mottled the water. Day 3 I greeted the same elderly man feeding pigeons. He tipped his cap and said, "Beautiful day to own your shadow." I hadn't heard that phrase before but it lodged deep. Afternoons became strategy hours. My legal team, Vic plus paralegal interns hungry for real-world giant slaying, updated me over encrypted video. IRS audit gaining traction, forensic accountants mapping Cayman flows. Board installing firewall between Melissa and digital banking tokens. Each victory felt less like vengeance, more like epidemiology. Contain the contagion before it harms others. Evenings I switched to creation, journaling longhand, sketching furniture concepts I'd shelved while Melissa ran the aesthetic show. One design, a library table with hidden cable routing, made me laugh. I'd once pitched it and been told clients didn't value nerd furniture. Maybe they did. Maybe she didn't. On the 7th night, fairy lights twinkling like low-voltage constellations, I queued up Bill Withers on my phone, same trumpet tune from Courthouse Plaza, and danced barefoot. No choreography, no witness. Grief wove through the rhythm, but joy took the lead. I fell asleep amazed by how quiet autonomy sounds, not an absence, but a hum, like a refrigerator keeping essentials cool while the rest of life thaws. When dawn seeped pink through curtains, I made avocado toast because clichés taste fine when nobody's judging, then opened email to find Lila Moreno's message. Ready to publish? You sure? I reread her exposé draft, swallowed hard, and typed, "Send it live." The first domino had been nudged. Thursday, 8:12 a.m., my phone dinged with Lila's link. Hidden heirs and hollow ledgers, inside Hughes Hayes Designs family fraud. I skimmed on the balcony, sun snagging my screen. Photos accompanied, Jordan and Melissa arriving at a gala, timestamp aligning with a supposed client pitch in Houston. Sidebar, forensic diagrams of money funnels terminating in JE Holdings. Lila's prose cut surgical clean, no hyperbole, just timelines and quotes from sources close to the board. She'd omitted my name at my request. Whistleblower anonymity rarely lasts, but I wanted a head start. The internet doesn't whisper, it stampedes. By noon, Architectural Digest Online retweeted the piece. By 2, a trending hashtag emerged, #sign blueprint betrayal. Memes followed. A skeleton in a hard hat labeled real founder. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or vomit. Melissa responded through a PR firm. My estranged husband disseminates falsehoods during a difficult personal transition. Generic photo, chin lifted, pearl earrings, no mention of Jordan. Comments skewered her. Screenshots say otherwise. Show us the receipts. The receipts were already viral, anyone clicking knew. At 4 p.m., I received an encrypted text from Meredith. Board suspended Melissa pending investigation. HR escort, building badge revoked. I pictured her corner office, custom Italian desk, succulent eye watered whenever she forgot, now sealed like a crime scene. Mixed emotions fluttered, triumph, sadness, disbelief they could coexist. Jordan surfaced briefly on LinkedIn. Taking time to focus on family priorities. I screenshotted before it disappeared. Rumor said he'd flown to Denver, tried withdrawing 50 grand, found accounts frozen. People who've lived on other people's credit rarely handle cash flow cliffs with grace. That evening, Grace and I shared tacos on my balcony. She toasted with Mexican Coke, glass bottle sweating. To paper trails, she said. Fireworks popped in the distance, some Dodgers win maybe. I felt weight shift inside my sternum, like furniture rearranging. But press storms don't blow out. They swirl. 2 days later, an ex-intern emailed Lila, subject line NDAs and stolen mock-ups. Her statement detailed nights redesigning a boutique hotel facade while Jordan partied. Melissa presented the work the next morning as her son protege's brilliance. Lila published follow-up. Credit theft pattern emerges. Other employees chimed in, anonymity be damned. A mosaic formed. A culture of appropriation disguised as mentorship. The coup de grace arrived when a disgruntled accountant leaked internal Slack threads. Melissa mocking my dad's sneakers, Jordan joking that old man still signs payroll lol. Petty, yes, but cruelty leaves forensic bruises. Viewership quadrupled. Meanwhile, my Echo Park sanctuary hummed gentle. I cooked lentil soup, refreshed comment feeds sparingly, answered calls from attorneys and the IRS. Shockingly, none demanded I take responsibility. Truth, once documented, commands respect. Sunday afternoon I hiked Elysian Park, phone on airplane mode. At a lookout I met an elderly woman painting the skyline in watercolors. She gestured to the brush. Mistakes become features, she said, dotting crimson where a drip had bled. I watched Los Angeles blush in her panorama and thought, if mistakes can beautify canvas, maybe they can human souls too. On the descent I powered on my phone, 143 unread notifications. I breathed, then kept walking, gravity and victory sharing equal pull. Monday morning I collected mail from the Echo Park porch mailbox, mostly grocery flyers and a single cream-colored envelope stamped Department of the Treasury. My pulse kicked. Inside, acknowledgement of evidence provided, notice of formal audit of Hughes Hayes Design Group and affiliates. A line near the bottom. We appreciate your cooperation in safeguarding public trust. I laughed, short, incredulous, because government letters rarely flatter. I scanned it, texted Vic. Stage 2 engaged. He replied with fireworks emoji. I forwarded a copy to Meredith for board records. Her reply. Thank you. Employees breathing easier. I imagine the bullpen where junior architects once tiptoed around Melissa's moods now exhaling collectively. Audit repercussions landed fast. Corporate credit lines froze, Apple Pay pings denied. Vendors demanded cash. I heard a rumor that Melissa tried booking a boutique obstetrics package, water birth with coastal view, but her card declined. Petty, perhaps, yet cosmic symmetry has a wicked sense of humor. Jordan, apparently back from Denver, attempted damage control via podcast, some bro business show. His line, financial irregularities are overblown, our focus remains innovation. The host pressed on insider trading whispers. Jordan stammered. No further comment. Clip went viral, popcorn for the masses. Meanwhile I spent hours with Cheryl Lau, auditing savant. We huddled at her Culver City office amid whiteboards scribbled like calculus nightmares. She unearthed a pattern, Melissa funneled corporate charitable donations into a Community Arts Alliance shell whose only expenditure was a Malibu beach rental. And beneficiary? Jordan's brand retreat. Cheryl whistled. They didn't even try to hide it well. She assembled a report thick as a Russian novel. We encrypted, couriered to auditor in charge. I half expected thunder to rumble. Instead, LA traffic sputtered outside, indifferent. Evenings continued simple: rice cooker, indie playlists, light drafting of furniture blueprints. One design, a modular bookshelf shaped like an equalizer wave, felt particularly cathartic. I posted a render to Instagram, new account under Hayes Makes. 10 likes turned to 300 overnight. Creativity doesn't die. It hibernates. Midweek, an email from Rebalance Foundation. Your story resonates, Robert. Could we invite you to join our board? I hesitated. Exposure risk, but accepted. Some bruises become lanterns for others. Friday, a courier delivered a manila envelope to my door, no return address. Inside, Polaroids of Melissa and Jordan at a cabin, date stamped last Christmas. They posed with matching sweaters, mom and dad to be emblazoned. A note scribbled on hotel stationery. Truth finds oxygen. I burned the photos over the kitchen sink, not out of fear but refusal to let them tint my new walls. That night I dreamed of blueprints morphing into birds. They flapped, escaped drafting tables, and soared. When I awoke, first light fanned across the pine floor, and I realized, the audit, the headlines, even divorce court were external weather. My climate had changed on the inside first, the moment I refused silence at a candlelit table. I brewed coffee, no sugar, inhaled the aroma, and welcomed daybreak like a ledger finally balancing. 3 knocks echoed through the Echo Park apartment one humid afternoon. At the door stood Arlo Brennan, 90th a day, suit pressed like origami. Melissa's late father's estate attorney. His leather briefcase exhaled the scent of cedar and dust. Mr. Hayes, he greeted. May I? Tea seemed appropriate. I offered chamomile. Arlo waved it away, withdrew 2 packets from his briefcase. Your father-in-law's will, he said, tapping the thicker bundle. And the amended version Ms. Hughes filed 3 months before his heart attack. I scanned page 1. Original will: 20% of Henry Hughes' art collection to my dear son-in-law Robert, plus the Sonoma cottage and a modest cash bequest, for the scholar my daughter married. Amendments. My name excised. All assets diverted to Melissa. Signatures shaky. Witness lines blank. Arlo adjusted bifocals. Henry was bedridden but not incompetent. I recall him praising you often. I swallowed. He told me he'd set aside the cottage for our retirement. Said he wanted me to paint again. Arlo's gaze softened. I suspected something was amiss but lacked standing. He slid a smaller envelope forward. Henry's final letter, never mailed. Curiosity wrestled caution. Curiosity won. Inside, 1 page, blue ink. Rob, Melissa worries you'll resent me for favoring blood. You should know, I changed nothing. Whatever paper reaches probate, it's not my hand. Trust your instincts. My throat tightened. Even in death, Henry had tried to warn me. Legal remedies? Arlo shook his head. Statute limitations, probate closed, assets likely liquidated to cover Hughes Hayes' debts. I'm sorry, he repeated, like a refrain. After he left, I sank onto the futon, letter fluttering. Betrayal had metastasized across generations. Melissa forged not only corporate documents but her own father's final wishes. I grieved a second time for a man who once taught me to barbecue without charring cedar plank salmon. Tears threatened, anger seared them dry. I walked to the kitchenette, poured bourbon into a chipped mug, and toasted Henry's unheeded honesty. Then, a thought. One cannot restore stolen inheritance, but one can redirect its impact. I drafted an email to Rebalance Foundation Board. Propose creation of the Henry Hughes Fellowship for Financial Survivors, seed funding from personal royalties. Hit send before fear vetoed generosity. Night deepened. Cicadas whirred. I unfolded the painting easel Grace had given me last birthday. Blank canvas glared, but I dotted cerulean in one corner. Stroke led to stroke, abstract coastline maybe. I wasn't painting for gallery acclaim, I painted to claim time Henry wanted me to have. At 1 a.m., phone buzzed. Unknown number, Jordan, Melissa? I silenced it, returned to blending cobalt into midnight blue. Color overruled chaos. When I finally stepped back, sweat at my temples, the canvas looked like a storm clearing beyond a headland. Imperfect but honest. I signed initials RH bottom corner, first time in decades. Outside, LA streetlights haloed palm fronds. I pressed Henry's letter flat beneath glass on my side table, a quiet headstone for trust broken, and a reminder that even forged signatures can't counterfeit legacy. 3 weeks later, Rebalance Foundation hosted its annual summit inside a converted warehouse downtown. Exposed rafters, Edison bulbs, folding chairs, aesthetic inverse of Melissa's gala excess. I arrived early. Mine was the closing keynote, but I wanted to breathe the space. Volunteers buzzed, pinning banners. Reclaim, rebuild, rebalance. A coffee urn hissed. At a registration table, a young man handed me a lanyard. His name tag read Eddie, intern/survivor. We exchanged a knowing nod. Morning sessions covered legal literacy, digital safety workshops, group therapy circles. I floated between, ears open. One gray-haired retiree confessed she'd signed over her pension because love means trust. A college student described crypto losses to a manipulative boyfriend. Pain wore many dialects. During lunch, Rebalance's director, Sasha Menon, pulled me aside. "Your audit story tripled our traffic," she said, eyes bright. "We've secured a grant to expand workshops into rural areas." I accepted her gratitude but deflected hero worship. "Truth is communal," I said. I just pressed send. Backstage, I reviewed my speech. It wasn't memoir, it was blueprint. 1. Identify gaslighting language in finances. 2. Preserve digital copies off-site. 3. Build redundancy networks, friends, therapists, attorneys. 4. Redefine masculinity beyond provider myths. When Sasha introduced me, applause felt warm, not idolizing. I stepped to the mic, spotlight gentle, not interrogative. "I'm Robert Hayes," I began, voice steady. "And for 30 years I believed silence earned love." Rows of faces leaned forward, some tearful, some stoic. Silence doesn't buy love, it mortgages your identity. I spoke of Le Brioche Noir, of signatures forged, of the motel room where dignity resurrected. I quoted Henry Hughes' letter. I ended. "Rebuilding starts when we stop auditioning for roles we never auditioned to play." Standing ovation? Yes, but I listened for something else. The collective exhale of people realizing self-worth is not a shared bank account. Afterwards, Eddie approached with damp eyes. "My dad hung your article on the fridge," he said. It got him to open up about mom's gambling. We hugged, two strangers bound by math turned human. Local news filmed a segment. Whistleblower turns advocate. Melissa would see it. I didn't care. I cared that a woman in the corner scribbled notes, nodding vigorously. Evening reception featured a modest jazz trio. I sipped club soda, chatted with donors. One, a venture capital partner, said, "If you ever spin up a new design consultancy, call me." I tucked the card away. Maybe. When I finally exited, twilight bruised the horizon. I walked the 6 blocks home, passing murals lit by streetlight. On one, a phoenix rose from 10-foot flames. Someone had spray painted beneath. "Ashes fertile." I snapped a photo, set it as phone wallpaper. Back in my apartment, I removed the lanyard, hung it on a nail beside the nascent coastline painting. 2 talismans, one of survival, one of creation. I slept dreamless, heartbeat aligned with purpose's metronome. Writing a book is like excavating your own crime scene. Every sentence uncovers fingerprints of compromise, footprints of fear. I began blueprint to nowhere by taping butcher paper across my living room wall, timeline down the center, red marker for love, black for betrayal. 12 feet later, I saw the pattern. Generosity exploited, warnings ignored, silence weaponized. Daily routine formed. Coffee at dawn, 1,000 words before emails. By week 3 my narrator voice stabilized. Dry humor, unsentimental introspection. Grace served as first reader, her margin notes alternated between cut the legalese and lean into the hurt. Chapter titles crystallized. Blueprints and blindfolds, fireproof lies, the motels we deserve. I wrestled with whether to include Jordan's paternity secret, publishers suggested marketability, lawyers advised caution. Ultimately, I disguised identities but preserved truth. Jordan became Theo, Melissa Marion. The essentials remained, a wife, her protege lover, a forged empire. 6 months in, a literary agent, Mara Klein, visited my apartment. She perched on the futon, manuscript pages fanned like tarot cards. "This isn't just memoir," she said. "It's an anti-handbook for financial codependency." She pitched auction strategy, audio rights, foreign rights. I requested one clause, 10% of royalties to Henry Hughes Fellowship. Mara agreed without blinking. Editing was scalpels and sandpaper. I cut digressions about facade materials, added scenes of quiet intimacy lost. Melissa tracing my laugh lines, my attempt to learn her grandmother's lasagna recipe. Pain needs context or it's just noise. The day the first pass proofs arrived, I sat cross-legged on the pine floor, box cutter in hand. The cover, matte charcoal, title embossed, felt lighter than expected, as if stories shed weight when inked. I cried, yes, but softly, tears sliding without sobs. I called Grace. She drove over with sparkling cider. Launch week blurred. Podcast interviews, NPR segment, Goodreads Q&A. Social media buzzed, readers quoted lines about silent compromises. One tweet. Message to my ex, bought at Robert Hayes' book, highlighting every chapter you should have read. Sales rankings climbed. Then came Melissa's cease and desist. Thick envelope, courier. Allegations, defamation, invasion of privacy, weaponized emotional narrative. Mara laughed. "Truth is defense," she said, filing response. I scanned the letter, posted to my website captioned, "Silence looks like this when it's scared." #, we see Hayes trended alongside photos of readers holding the book in laundromats, cornfields, boardrooms. Jordan remained invisible, perhaps gag ordered by his lawyer, perhaps ashamed. I felt surprising pity. He'd been orchestrated since birth. Pity doesn't annul accountability, but it tempers vengeance. Royalty statements arrived. 6-figure first quarter. I wired 10% to Rebalance, another 10 to Fellowship Fund. Mara recommended a sequel. I smiled. Maybe later. One quiet Tuesday, I printed the book's dedication, "To anyone who ever mistook survival for love," framed it on the wall opposite my painting. Words and color conversed, narrative and horizon. That night, I closed the laptop, poured tea, opened the window. Autumn air carried distant sirens. I wasn't healed. Healing isn't binary. But I was author of my next draft, pen uncapped, page waiting. The call came on a sunset Friday, sky-bruised coral. Unknown number. I almost rejected, but curiosity lifted my thumb. Robert? Melissa's voice, brittle veneer over panic. I pictured her in some echoing rented condo, lights off to save electricity. Yes. Pause. They're repossessing the office furniture. Jordan's unavailable. I can't pay staff. What do you want from me? A gull shrieked outside, slicing silence. I considered telling her about the gull, the way freedom sounds like sea air, but brevity won. Nothing, I said. The word seemed to widen the gulf. She inhaled sharply. You can't leave me with nothing, voice cracked. Pregnant. I leaned against the balcony rail. You made choices. I'm merely ceasing subsidy. I was loyal, she whispered. My laugh startled even me, non-malicious, astonished. You were loyal to the story where I remained invisible. I exhaled. I hope you find peace, Melissa. But you'll search without my resources. Silence thickened, then the faintest sob quickly muffled. You were always the better one, she breathed, like confession or curse. I terminated the call. No anger surged, only tired empathy. Melissa wasn't villain incarnate, she was a person whose fear of scarcity weaponized charm. Understanding doesn't equal absolution. I turned to see Grace on the sofa, having entered during the conversation. She raised brows. Closure. Maybe, I said. Or prelude to her redemption arc. Grace poured wine. We toasted but didn't celebrate. Endings deserve solemnity. They also deserve forward momentum. She cued a movie. We watched, companionable quiet. Later, brushing teeth, I glanced in the mirror. I did not seem triumphant. I seemed hollowed and ready to refill with something lighter. Good. I drafted an email to my therapist. Weekly sessions had given vocabulary to spiraling thoughts. Subject, when compassion meets boundaries. Sent. Healing requires professional pit crew. Sleep that night was dream patchwork. Le brioche glass shattering, auditor stamping documents, Jordan as child asking if I'd teach him layups. I awoke before dawn, heart steady. Dreams lose power when daylight interrogates them. Over breakfast, phone buzzed, Meredith. The board had voted to dissolve Hughes Hayes, liquidate remaining assets to satisfy tax liens and employee severance. She offered condolences. I thanked her, offered letter of recommendation. Good people salvageable. News outlets ran headlines. Design empire crumbles under weight of lies. I skimmed without pleasure. Schadenfreude tastes metallic. In mailbox, early copy of Blueprint to Nowhere foreign translation, German cover depicting fractured blueprint lines. Surreal. I placed it on shelf beside original. That evening I walked Ocean Avenue. Vendors closed stalls, gulls circled trash cans. At a bench I watched surfer silhouette against amber. Melissa's call replayed briefly, desperation notes. I whispered a fragile wish that her child inherit honesty genes skip. On walk back, I typed 2 words in phone's notes app. Next venture? Maybe an ethical design studio employing whistle-blown talent. Maybe furniture line donating profits. Options no longer tethered to salvaging a past. Back at apartment, I locked door gently, as if sealing final chapter. After storms, the air smells ionized, like new parchment. That's how autumn settled over Echo Park. Lawsuits concluded, audits in final tally, media cycle pivoted to fresher scandals. For the first time in a year, my phone could remain face down without dread. Mornings, yoga in the living room via YouTube. Joints pop protests but adapted. Snake plant thrived, a green sentinel. I tried intermittent fasting, part experiment, part discipline. Hunger at noon reminded me I'm alive, not merely existing. I resumed sketching custom furniture. Local woodworker, Mateo, agreed to prototype the Equalizer bookshelf. His Highland Park workshop smelled of cedar and possibility. We debated joinery angles, laughed about industry ego. Collaboration apps and power games refreshed muscles I forgot I owned. Afternoons, volunteer hotline shifts for rebalance. I listened to stories. A man from Ohio whose partner forged loans. A retired nurse whose daughter drained retirement via online shopping under guardian power. I offered resources, yes, but mostly validation. Hearing their relief validated my own. Evenings belonged to small pleasures. Thrift store novels, record store browsing, noodle truck dinners on a park bench. I learned difference between solitude and loneliness. The former includes contentment. One foggy Wednesday, I noticed I hadn't Googled Melissa's name in 23 days. Progress metric. Another morning, a letter arrived from the IRS. Final audit determination, back taxes assessed, penalties levied, criminal referral optional pending compliance. Hughes Hayes formally defunct. I tucked the notice in a file labeled closed loops. Closure is paperwork, not fireworks. Grace visited, cinnamon rolls perfected. We ate laughing, no strategic maps needed. She eyed my canvas, now layered with brighter strokes. Storms clearing, she observed. Indeed, I met Eddie from Rebalance for coffee. He showed mock-ups of a mobile app educating users on financial red flags. He asked if I'd beta test. Purpose seeds propagate. One quiet Sunday I drove the Pacific Coast Highway to Malibu, windows down. Radio played Bill Withers again. Rather than haunt, it felt grounding. I stopped at a lookout, sketched cliffs, watched pelicans skim swells. Nobody awaited status reports. Time dilated pleasantly. Returning home, voicemail icon blinked. Publisher updates, nothing urgent. I left it for morning. I noticed the apartment smelled of sandalwood from a new candle. I'd purchased it impulsively, not considering anyone else's fragrance preference. Such tiny rebellions stack into identity. Before bed, I sat on balcony. Downtown skyline glittered. Helicopters blinked red. Noise of city felt like distant applause, not threat. I whispered thanks. To Grace, to Henry, to strangers who shared pain, to younger me who finally walked out of that restaurant. Then silence. Not emptiness, but a canvas primed. I wrote tomorrow's to-do list: prototype pickup, hotline shift, finish reading novel. Ordinary tasks shaped by extraordinary freedom. As I closed journal, breeze flipped back pages. I glimpsed early frantic entries, rage scrawls, fear metrics. I touched those lines, then turned to the blank page, pen poised but not pressured. Quiet can be loud enough. April 10th, 1 year to the day since crystal shattered illusions. I drove pre-dawn to Point Doom. Highway empty save for surfers' vans and delivery trucks. At the Bluffs parking lot, I slung a canvas tote over my shoulder. Thermos, sketchbook, copy of Blueprint to Nowhere, German edition. Souvenir of metamorphosis. Sand chilled my bare feet, each grain tiny reminder of scale. My saga significant to me, microscopic to Pacific's epic. Gulls mewed. Horizon smoldered magenta, then ignited gold. I planted myself near driftwood, inhaled marine breath, and began sketching, the way sunrise fingers cliffs, the foamy punctuation of waves. Lines flowed without apology to technique. I contemplated years' ledger. Marriage dissolved, company collapsed, but also foundation founded, fellowship seated, friendships forged. Net gain of integrity. Thermos steamed Earl Grey as gulls debated crust scraps. I toasted Henry Hughes' invisible mentorship, sipped. Phone vibrated once, Agent Mara. I ignored. Another, Mateo. Bookshelf ready. Good news can wait behind sunrise. Wind rifled pages of German translation beside me. The foreign vowels of my story looked freshly invented, proof that pain, once transmuted, becomes portable empathy. I closed eyes, let surf soundtrack reflection. Melissa's last words echoed. You were always the better one. Not scoreboard but realization of what love without respect costs. I wished her child freedom from inherited deceit. Compassion and boundary can coexist. Therapy taught that. Opening eyes, I watched young surfers carve waves, balance earned through wipeouts. Healing similar. I gathered belongings, hiked to Trailhead Lookout. From that height, coastline serpented north, promise on every undulation. I snapped a photo. Maybe it'd inspire a table design, wood legs mirroring shoreline curves. Back at the car, I finally listened to Mara's voicemail. Foreign rights in Italy, Spain, and South Korea sold. Penguin Random House interested in follow-up focused on rebuilding finances post-betrayal. I smiled. Books breed books. As engine warmed, I typed Mateo. Picking up shelf tomorrow. Can we discuss a desk commission? Entrepreneurship whispers. No need to shout. Driving home, radio static resolved into an old Springsteen track. Better days. I cranked volume, sang badly. Echo Park greeted me with jacaranda blossoms littering sidewalks like lavender confetti. I parked, carried tote upstairs. Snake plant sprouted newbie leaf, metaphor delivered by chlorophyll. On desk, mail, invitation to keynote at International Design Ethics Symposium, accepted. I brewed coffee, reopened balcony door. Neighbor's wind chime tinkled. I opened laptop, created new file, venture outline V1. Title placeholder, Hayes & Collab, design without exploitation. Bullet 1, cooperative ownership shares. Bullet 2, mentoring interns without stolen credit. I grinned, type bullet 3, dog-friendly office mandatory. Sun angled through windows, spotlighting painting, now framed. Storm had cleared, seascape glowed. I whispered final gratitude to version of myself who, 1 year prior, chose door over hostage seat. Without him, today's sky would be ceiling. Notebook open, I wrote singular sentence. Your future begins where their narrative ends. Underlined twice. I stepped back, let silence settle, then began drafting chapter 1 of whatever came next. No deadline, only horizon. Thanks for watching. If any word echoed your own quiet revolution, share below. Someone scrolling might need your courage today.